Before we begin, if you love powerful stories of courage, love, and redemption in the Old West, make sure to hit that subscribe button, like this video, and share it with your friends. And don't forget to comment below where you're watching from. Now saddle up, partner, because this story is about a lone cowboy who found a lost Apache girl and discovered her mother was a beautiful widow who would change his life forever. This is Love in the Old West, and it's one you'll never. The sun had barely risen over the dusty plains when cowboy Luke Dawson noticed a small figure wandering near the canyon's edge. The morning wind carried a faint cry, a sound too fragile to be an animal. He slowed his horse, squinting through the golden haze of dawn. There she was, a young Apache girl, barefoot, trembling, her dark eyes filled with fear and exhaustion. Luke's instincts took over. He dismounted slowly, keeping his hands visible, his voice gentle. "Easy there, little one," he murmured. She didn't answer, just hugged a small beaded pouch to her chest and stared like a frightened fawn. Luke knelt and offered her water. She hesitated, then drank, her hands shaking. Dirt streaked her face, her braids were loose, and her small feet were raw from walking. It was clear she'd been alone for days. Luke glanced around the open prairie, no riders, no tracks, no sign of anyone. He sighed, wrapped his coat around her, and lifted her gently into his saddle. "You're safe now," he whispered, though even he wasn't sure what that meant. He turned his horse toward his ranch, the sound of hooves echoing softly in the wide silence. Back at the ranch, Luke warmed some broth on the stove. The girl sat by the fire, wrapped in a wool blanket, her eyes never leaving him. She didn't speak English, only murmured a single word again and again, "Naya." Luke thought it might be her name, but when he repeated it, she shook her head and pointed toward the stars outside the window. "Naya," she said softly, "Mother." Luke's chest tightened. Somewhere out there was a mother searching for her child, maybe believing she was already gone. Days turned into weeks, and the girl, he started calling her Luna, began to smile again. She helped feed the chickens, brushed the horses, and followed Luke everywhere. Her laughter filled the ranch with a warmth he hadn't felt in years. But every night before bed, she'd look toward the horizon as if waiting for someone. Luke couldn't stand the thought of her mother wondering, praying, never knowing. One afternoon, while repairing a fence near the creek where he had found her, Luke noticed fresh moccasin tracks. He followed them cautiously into the hills until he spotted a small campfire flickering between the rocks. There, standing tall and proud despite her ragged clothes, was a woman, her hair long and dark, her eyes fierce yet filled with sorrow. Luke froze. She matched Luna's eyes exactly. When she saw him, her hand went instinctively to the knife at her side. "Who are you?" she demanded in broken English. "Why you follow me?" Luke raised his hands slowly. "Ain't looking for trouble, ma'am. Found a little girl near this creek some weeks ago. She's safe now." The woman's breath caught. "Little girl," she whispered. "Her name Taya." Luke nodded gently. "Been calling her Luna." The woman's eyes filled with tears. "She is my daughter. I am Naya." Luke's heart pounded. "Then we best get you home." He helped her onto his horse, and together they rode back toward the ranch. When Luna Taya saw her mother, she froze for a moment, then screamed with joy, running straight into Naya's arms. The reunion was wordless, raw, and powerful. Naya held her close, sobbing quietly into her daughter's hair. Luke turned away, his throat tight. He'd done what was right, yet the ranch suddenly felt empty again. But Naya didn't leave. The land was dangerous, full of outlaws and broken treaties. She asked to stay for a short while until it was safe to travel. Luke agreed. Over the next few days, they spoke more. She told him of the night raiders attacked her village, men pretending to trade, who instead burned homes and stole what they pleased. She searched for Taya for weeks, surviving on little but hope. Luke listened, silently admiring her courage. Evenings grew longer. They'd sit by the fire, talking in half-broken phrases. Luke taught her a few English words. She taught him Apache ones. Taya would sit nearby, humming soft songs as flames danced in her dark eyes. Luke found himself watching Naya more than he should, her calm strength, her quiet beauty, the way the light touched her hair. He tried to push it aside. She belonged to another world, and he had no right to hers. One night, as stars spread like diamonds across the desert sky, Naya looked up and whispered, "My people say stars are our ancestors. They watch us always." Luke smiled faintly. "Then I reckon they're watching two folks who have been through hell and still keep going." She turned to him, her eyes soft. "You have a kind heart, Cowb." He looked down shyly, "just trying to do what's right." The peace didn't last long. A few days later, riders appeared at the horizon, 5 men armed and rough-looking. Luke knew trouble when he saw it. They stopped near the gate, their leader, a scarred outlaw, grinning cruelly. "We're looking for an Apache woman and her brat," he called out. "Hand 'em over, and maybe we'll leave your ranch standing." Luke stepped forward, rifle in hand. "Ain't no one here by that description," he said calmly. The outlaw spat. "Don't lie to me, Cowboy. We know she's here." The air went still. Luke's finger tightened on the trigger. "Then you best turn around before I send you to meet your maker." Gunfire erupted. Bullets tore through the fence, splintering wood. Luke ducked behind a trough, firing back. The outlaws spread out, circling. Naya grabbed Taya, dragging her toward the barn. One of the men followed, sneering, but Naya was faster. She snatched a lantern and hurled it at him, the flame exploding into a wall of fire. The barn blazed, smoke curling into the sky. Luke hit one outlaw in the shoulder, another in the leg. The rest turned tail, cursing as they fled into the hills. When the gunfire faded, Luke rushed to the barn, where Naya was shielding Taya with her body. "You all right?" he asked, breathless. She nodded weakly. "Thanks to you." He helped her to her feet, his hands lingering on hers a moment longer than needed. That night, as the firelight flickered across the porch, Naya sat beside Luke, her head resting lightly on his shoulder. "You risked your life for us," she whispered. "You didn't have to." Luke looked at her, his voice low. "Guess I did. Ain't every day a man meets someone worth fighting for." The desert was quiet again, stars shining above them. Taya slept inside, safe at last. Luke knew life on the frontier would never be simple, but as Naya's hand found his, he realized something he hadn't felt in years: peace. The cowboy who once rode alone had found not just a lost girl, but a reason to stay, to love, and to hope again. The days that followed were calm but heavy with unspoken feelings. The fire that once burned in the barn was replaced by warmth between two people who had both lost more than they could ever explain. Naya worked quietly around the ranch, helping Rosa in the kitchen, caring for the animals, and teaching Taya to sing again. Luke often found himself watching from afar, pretending to fix the corral fence or saddle a horse, but truth was, he couldn't take his eyes off her. Every movement she made seemed full of purpose. She lived through things few could survive, yet her spirit wasn't broken. At night, when Taya was asleep, they would sometimes sit outside on the porch together. The desert air was cool, and the stars looked close enough to touch. Luke would tell her stories about his cattle drives and about the time he rode from Texas to New Mexico in a blizzard just to deliver medicine to a sick family. Naya would listen, smiling softly, then share her own tales, stories her father once told her about the mountains, the rivers, and the spirits that lived within them. For Luke, it was the first time in years he felt like he belonged somewhere with someone, but the peace they'd found was fragile. Word spread quickly in the nearby town that Luke Carson had taken in an Apache woman and child. Whispers turned into insults. Some men at the saloon called him a traitor. One evening, when Luke rode into town for supplies, the blacksmith refused to serve him. "We don't trade with red lovers," the man spat. Luke clenched his fists, but said nothing. He knew better than to fight with fools. Still, the hatred strung deep. When he returned home that night, Naya was waiting on the porch. She could tell something was wrong just by the way he moved. "They said things?" she asked quietly. Luke sighed, taking off his hat. "They said plenty, but none of it matters. You and Taya belong here now, that's all I care about." She looked up at him, her eyes glimmering in the moonlight. "People fear what they do not understand. My people, your people, both have lost too much to anger." Luke nodded slowly. "Maybe we can change that. Maybe not for everyone, but for us." The next morning, life went on. The ranch needed fixing, the cattle needed herding, and Taya's laughter filled the yard once more. Luke taught her to ride a pony, her small hands gripping the reins with determination. Naya watched from the porch, her heart swelling with gratitude. For the first time since the raid, she saw her daughter smiling again, fearless and free. But peace never stays long in the West. A week later, Luke found tracks near the property again, different ones this time, heavy. Boots, horses, not Apache. He followed the trail and discovered a small camp hidden in the brush. 6 men, the same outlaws who had attacked before. They hadn't gone far, they'd only been waiting for reinforcements. Luke returned to the ranch at dusk, his face grim. "We've got trouble common," he said. Naya's expression didn't waver. "Then we fight." He shook his head. "Not if I can help it. I'll draw them away." but she stepped forward, placing her hand over his. "You gave us shelter, protection, kindness. Let me stand with you." That night they prepared. Luke loaded his rifle, checked the horses, and made sure Taya was hidden safely in the cellar with Rosa. The sound of the wind carried through the open land, whispering like a warning. Then came the hoofbeats, slow at first, then faster. The outlaws rode in under the cover of darkness, guns ready. Luke was already waiting, crouched behind the wagon. When the first man fired, Luke answered with a single sharp shot that echoed across the valley. Naya moved like lightning, her bow in hand, arrows whistling through the night. 2 men fell before they even saw where the shots came from. The leader, the scarred man, cursed loudly. "You're dead, Carson. Ain't no one hides from me." Luke ducked behind a post as bullets splintered the wood beside him. He spotted the outlaw's shadow near the barn and fired, missed by an inch. The man charged forward, and the two collided in a violent struggle. The gun went flying. Fists swung, boots kicked, dust rose. Luke took a punch to the jaw but landed one harder, sending the man stumbling back. Before the outlaw could recover, Naya appeared from the shadows, bow drawn. Her arrow found its mark, piercing the ground beside his boot. "Next one goes in your heart," she said coldly. The man froze, hands trembling. Luke picked up his rifle, eyes hard as steel. "You ride out of here and you never come back." The outlaw spat on the ground, rage flashing across his scarred face. "This ain't over, Cowboy." But Luke stepped closer, pressing the barrel to his chest. "It is now." The man looked at Naya, her calm, unwavering gaze, and knew he'd lost. He mounted his horse and rode off, his men scrambling after him into the dark. When the last hoofbeat faded, silence fell again. Naya lowered her bow, her hands shaking slightly. Luke walked over, touching her shoulder gently. "You all right?" She nodded, breathing hard. "I am now." The following morning, the ranch was quiet again, but the air felt different. Taya came running out, throwing her arms around both of them. "They're gone?" she asked. Luke smiled, lifting her up. "They're gone for good." Naya watched them, tears glistening in her eyes, not of fear, but of relief. For the first time in months, she felt safe. Over the next few weeks, the bond between Luke and Naya grew deeper. The townsfolk who once whispered began to see things differently. When they heard how Luke had defended his home and the Apache woman from outlaws, respect replaced suspicion. Even the sheriff rode out to shake his hand, saying, "You did this territory proud, Carson." Spring came early that year. The desert bloomed with wildflowers and the ranch thrived. One afternoon, Luke found Naya by the creek, braiding flowers into Taya's hair. He stood quietly for a moment, then said, "You ever think about staying, not just for a while, permanently?" Naya looked up, startled. "You mean here?" Luke nodded. "Here with me, with us." For a long moment, she didn't answer. Then she reached out, taking his hand. "I once thought my home was gone forever," she said softly, "but maybe home is not a place, it's people. You and Taya are my home now." Luke's heart swelled. He smiled, pulling her close. Then it settled. That evening, under the orange glow of sunset, they stood outside the small cabin Luke had built years ago. Taya ran circles around them, laughing as her mother and the cowboy watched. The land stretched endlessly before them, a sea of gold and red, whispering with promise. Luke wrapped his arm around Naya, his voice quiet but full of certainty. Guess life had one more surprise left for this old cowboy. She leaned her head on his shoulder, smiling, and for this Apache woman. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the first stars began to shine, bright and clear, like silent witnesses to their story. Naya looked up and whispered something in her native tongue. Luke didn't understand the words, but he felt their meaning. It was gratitude, it was love, it was peace. And so, on that small ranch in the heart of the Arizona desert, a cowboy who once rode alone found a family he never expected. A lost girl, her brave mother, and a future that stretched wider than the plains themselves. Their story became one of those quiet legends whispered in saloons and campfires of the cowboy who adopted an Apache child and fell in love with her mother. A story not about conquest, but about redemption, courage, and the power of love to heal even the deepest scars of the wild frontier. And somewhere in that vast desert, under the same stars they once looked upon, the wind still carries their laughter, the sound of a cowboy, a widow, and a little girl who found each other when the world tried to keep them apart.